Welcome, I'm Paul, this is Dave. Today I have 14 Glitch in the Matrix and supernatural stories for you. You never know what you'll find down that dark alley. Case file number 2574, written by the Leviathan. What lurks beyond the Coke can? My cousin and I used to play outside in the middle of the night. We were 13, 14, since I lived close to a 24/7 PD. We'd grab our Nerf guns and pretend to have a mission of some sort. In this particular day, our mission was to find 3 Coke cans around the neighborhood, while targeting every car we see. We ended up on a little park between 2 houses. There, we found the last Coke can on the trash, and the mission was over. While heading back home, in one of the gaps between houses, kinda like a little alley, we heard movement. So we both looked at it and pointed our Nerf gun flashlight. And I swear on everything I know, right there in the corner, crouched and humped, it was a pale, skinny, and naked creature. It had no fur or any visual cues that would indicate what it was. After 2 seconds of shining light at it, the thing turned at us very fast, and started getting up very slowly. At this point I was frozen in fear. It was at least 2 meters in height. It either had black and big eyes or no eyes at all. I turned to my cousin and said, "Corre mano," run bro, in Portuguese. But he was already like 20 meters from me, where the street turned around a corner. So I ran as well, and we didn't speak about it till we got home. No idea what kind of monster that is, but good call to run. Case file number 2575, written by Extra Firefly. Score, Void, 87, me, 0. My husband has always given me a hard time because I lose everything. He accuses me of being absent-minded or too lazy to put things back where they go. Can't begin to count the number of times I've gone to get something. It's not where it's supposed to be, so then I start checking all other possible places. I'll check where it's supposed to be multiple times, usually once I've reached the point of total frustration. I'll check the item's home one more time, and there it will be. I've always just chalked it up to being forgetful. But there's always been this piece of me that feels like something or thing is messing with me to make me feel crazy. Today I was pulling up to the car wash, started to prepay in the app, remembered I had a voucher for a free wash, located the voucher, had it in my hand as I pulled up to the entrance, rolled down my window and went to hand it to the clerk, and it was gone. I got out and checked all inside and around my car. It's not in my pockets, not between the seats, it's just gone. Guarantee it'll turn up somewhere stupid obvious later. Classic DOP, although it vanishing from your hand is another layer. You didn't feel it happen. I guess you're not really thinking about the sensation, and then it's just gone. Case file number 2576, written by Aspism. CCTV says no, but my memory says yes. So here's the deal. I work as a salesperson in a tobacco press, a French shop that sells tobacco, newspapers, magazines, snacks, and some electronics. Most of the time, I'm selling cigarettes, but also snacks, multimedia stuff, and magazines and newspapers. I'm mostly alone in the shop, starting in the early afternoon when my boss finishes, so we overlap for about 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the day. The story happened last Monday. There are these 2 middle schoolers I'm starting to know pretty well who hang around the shop for an hour or less. They're mostly drawn by the fact that I sometimes offer them things like sandwiches that are going to be thrown out that day, so they tend to rummage through every item to check the expiration date, which makes them a bit of a pain. That day, they started touching the headphones, asking me things like, "How much are these 6 headphones?" and other childish stuff like that. While they were loitering, some customers came in. There must have been 3 of them, so a small queue formed. While the customer in front of me was paying, I noticed the customer behind him picking up a box of headphones. It was a tall black man, around 50 years old, dressed almost entirely in black, with a graying goatee and dreadlocks. His facial expression was quite stern. Once he got to the till, he asked me for a pack of cigarettes, no headphones. I suspected him of theft, so I glanced at the headphone display and saw that the headphones were back in place. I rang him up, he left, and shortly after, the middle schoolers left too. However, I still had a doubt, so I checked the headphones, and there were 5. but I remembered one of the middle schoolers talking about 6 headphones. I made a note on my phone, possible headphone theft at 3 p.m. The next day, at the time I started work, I asked my boss if it was possible to check the security camera footage because I suspected theft. She fast-forwarded it quite quickly, so you couldn't really see precise movements, but we could still make out the different customers entering and leaving. She found the beginning and end of the middle schoolers hanging out, and started looking for the customer who matched my physical description. Meanwhile, I was at the till dealing with the customers. Once a first wave of customers had paid, I went to the back, and my boss told me, "I didn't find the customer you're talking about. There's only this one who is also black, but he's much younger and dressed in white. Indeed, it wasn't him." She then said, "But actually, there was a theft. It was one of your middle schoolers." At that moment, I was mostly struck by the fact that one of the middle schoolers, the ones I had been so nice to, was the culprit. But when I think about it now, the fact that the customer I was talking about simply wasn't there is strange. She gave me the controls to review the theft precisely, and I also took the opportunity to watch before and after to find the guy with dreadlocks, but nothing at all. I could have confused that moment with another. Maybe that customer was never present at the same time as the middle schoolers, yet I clearly remember having thought about asking the middle schoolers if they'd seen him steal the headphones. Also, in response to the question, is there a way to check the sales at the time to see if you sold anyone Marlboros? I checked the transactions made from the 28th of April, between 3 p.m. and 3:30. No cigarettes were sold. I kinda identified a queue between 3:18 and 3:20, where 3 transactions have been made, but at 3:45, 2 Marlboros extra large were sold apart from each other. So 2 different customers here, and also another queue. But I'm almost certain that the customer I was talking about was here at the same time as the middle schoolers. But also the middle schoolers probably left before I started to clean the coffee machine, between 3:25 and 3:40 usually. Just a different reality, and the camera footage shows you the originating reality, so you were peering into a different one, a different copy of our entire universe, but you were just in that one spot in your usual workplace, and yeah. And in that universe there really was who you saw, an older black man. It's trippy, isn't it? Case file number 2577, written by Hoochie69 Mama. The Ghost of TikTok Past. Me and my partner were watching TV in our living room when our cat made a mad dash for the guest room in the back of the house. Since we moved into this house, the cat has shown zero interest in this room, as it is basically empty. But he was urgently searching for something, as if he was hunting. He was sniffing around and looking out the windows, just completely spazzing out. I noticed a strange noise that could be heard from within the walls of the guest room. I called my girlfriend over, as she heard it too, agreeing that the sound appeared to be coming from within the walls. Our house is old, and it was raining outside, so I thought raindrops were hitting a plant or a gutter and making a weird noise, but the noise was unnaturally rhythmic. It sounded like 3 taps, like water dripping on a tin can, and then a sawing noise, like a serrated blade dragging through wood. Tink, 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 sh, sh, sh. Pause for 2 seconds. Repeat. Over and over again. I walked all over the house, inside and out, and the sound was the loudest from the guest room walls. Eventually, the sound just stopped, and the cat left the bedroom. I returned to the living room, sat down on the couch, and pulled my phone out from my pocket. I opened the TikTok app, and the first video that popped up was a man cutting through limes all the way through the cutting board. He then began tapping a stainless steel cocktail shaker. Then I realized the sound from this TikTok video was the exact same sound that was emanating from within the walls of my guest bedroom. If my phone was off and in my pocket the whole time, how the hell was the TikTok sound coming from within my walls? Good question, and I don't know. Do you have a squatter living in your walls, watching TikTok videos? Huh, that's probably scarier than ghosts, I'd say. Case file number 2578, written by That Was Back in College. 1 brother, 2 bodies, infinite chaos. I have 2 kittens, a brother and a sister, about a year old. Close to full grown, but still super rambunctious. I work from home at the dining room table. Last Thursday, I was working on my laptop with my brother next to me on the table, playing with my pen. I hear loud kitten zombies behind me and expect to see sister running past me, but no, it is brother being chased by sister. I see them run from the kitchen, past the dining room, and into the living room, where a half wall then blocks my view. But this whole time, brother is also still standing right next to me on the table. Brother sees the whole thing and is now in full fluffy tail ears back alert mode about it. I walked into the living room, with brother following, and sister is standing in the middle of the room just staring at the empty coffee table. It's not the first time these crazy kittens have seemed to practically appear or disappear in front of me. They are so fast and sneaky, but it's literally the only time I've seen two of the same cat at once. They're moving so fast they have the after image from Dragon Ball Z. Case file number 2579, written by Ashley9225. Locked doors, loud music, and one very lost ghost. The house my parents live in is fairly old. Built in the 1950s, renovated and updated in the 70s, and not much done to it since. It's not creepy, but it's not the most comfortable. The insulation sucks, so it's freezing inside in winter and the water pressure is crap, etc. So it doesn't give you the creeps, but it's generally not where you want to be. They moved into it when I was 17, so about 13 years ago. When I was maybe 18 or 19, I was home alone vacuuming the living room. It was late afternoon, early evening, maybe 4 or 5 p.m. My parents weren't home from work yet, and my brother was at his girlfriend's house, so I was home alone. Because of this, I had every door locked. Again, it was a very old home, so we never bothered opening the windows, as they were old and creaky, and if you opened them, you'd need somebody to go outside and push on the window. The panes cranked open, not a slide-up window, to get it closed flush again. So the point is, I'm inside alone and the house is locked up tight. I'm vacuuming the living room, with my earbuds in my ears, so I'm not really paying attention, just doing my chores automatically, like I do every day. The doorway to the kitchen is to the right. I suddenly get that feeling like I'm being watched, and my senses heighten. I then realize there's someone standing in the kitchen doorway. I jump, practically throw the vacuum, shriek, and yank out my earbuds. "Who are you? What do you want?" It's an older man. Thinning hair on top, tall, dressed in clothing that looks circa 1970s. He doesn't react at all to my antics, doesn't even blink when I jumped or screamed. He's looking at me, not angry but almost confused and sad. He looks puzzled and sad. Without a word, he turns around in the doorway and walks off to the right, towards the back door in the kitchen. I'm shaking and scared, but I grab something heavy. I think it was one of my stepdad's sports decor pieces, and tiptoe towards the kitchen. I hadn't heard a single sound when I asked who he was. Not a footstep, which wasn't possible. The kitchen floor is creaky as hell. Not a door opening, nothing. I get to the kitchen doorway and peer around, then look towards the back door. The kitchen is empty. The back door is still bolted and locked. I open the one other door in the kitchen, the one leading to a bathroom that's connected to the den. He's in neither room. And the far door of the den is locked from the inside like it always is, and it can't be locked while the door is open and then closed again. You have to lock it from inside and turn around and go out through the bathroom and come out through the kitchen. I check the whole house. I unlock the back door and go check the backyard, the side of the house, the gate. All is empty and all is still locked. Here's the thing. The man? He was a dead ringer for the description we were given about the man who first bought the house back in the 1950s and who died there in the 1970s. The echo of someone who was really alive back then and then perished. For some reason he's still bound to the house, and it's not a haunting, it's just a spirit. He doesn't mean you any harm, and you got that sense of it. Case file number 2580, written by Buggy77, Smiling Silence. I was in the kitchen with my kids and my husband was outside working on his truck. I heard a knock on the garage door, leading into the house, and I looked over and saw the door was locked. I naturally assumed it was my husband who was trying to get in. I opened the door for him and he's standing there smiling and holding some tools in his hand. This is where it gets weird. I expected him to walk in and say something, but he just stood there. I was in the middle of doing something, so I said, "Are you coming in?" He didn't answer, and a few seconds had passed, so I shut the door. Walked away because I thought he was trying to joke with me. About a minute later, he opens up the door and walks in, so I said to him, "What the hell was that? Why did you just stand there and not say anything or try to come in before?" He claims he never knocked, never stood at the door with tools in his hand. I told him to stop kidding around, and that he was scaring me. But he swears he never knocked and stood there smiling in the doorway like that. I was getting upset and told him that he was messing with me and it wasn't funny. But again, he swears he didn't knock or come to the door. He thinks I hallucinated, but I'm not so sure. Nothing like that has ever happened before. Could it be a time glitch, a dream? Even though it was the middle of the day and I was up and walking around, could he have somehow blinked out and then walked over and knocked, but didn't remember? Case file number 2581, written by Becky12X, the woman who danced through November. When I was around 14, I was walking down a footpath at night with a friend when we saw a woman on the path in front of us wearing a long purple silk dress with gold jewelry. She was dancing as she walked. It was pretty strange, but we just thought, why not? She seems to be enjoying herself. It was weird that she wasn't freezing though, since it was raining quite heavily, and was around in November, so pretty cold. We were both wearing thick winter coats. Anyways, there was a man walking closely behind us that had been following us for a while, and as teenage girls, we were much more creeped out by this than the woman that was just minding her own business, dancing in the rain. The creepy part started when we got close to her and she froze, and stared at us with an empty expression. There was a really weird atmosphere, but we just smiled at her and did a little head nod, yes, we're British, and kept walking. She smiled back and continued dancing. We looked back to see that she had also stopped and started staring at the man, but he kept walking forward and didn't seem to acknowledge it, like he didn't even see her. We walked a little further down the way and I glanced back. The woman was still dancing, but the man was gone. I told my friend and we looked around, but unless he'd managed to climb over one of the really tall walls on either side of the path, there was no way for him to leave as the path was long and had no side paths, etc., that he would have been able to get to in time, even if he was running. We both had kinda different feelings about it, to be honest. We agreed that the energy the woman was giving off was powerful and quite unsettling. I think that she was protecting us, whereas my friend is convinced that something bad would have happened to us if we didn't smile and acknowledge that she was there. I think I have to side with you. I think this was a guardian angel, in spirit form, so the man couldn't see her, but she took care of business. Case file number 2582, written by Anonymous. The crash that already happened. I worked for a college in Oregon when I was younger. Had to leave at 10 p.m. after all the classes had ended. I was there for IT. Per the usual, I got in my car and headed home. It is pitch black in Oregon because of the trees and underbrush. I drove up Highway 20, vibing and listening to music, but noticed something walking along the guardrail up a hill. I've had run-ins with deer, so I immediately felt jumpy, because my lawnmower of a car would be obliterated by hitting even a possum. I focused on the walking figure and saw it was a homeless person, very common in Oregon, especially on the coast. He was quite a ways up on the hill, so I thought I'd have time to just go around him. He wore white shoes and a red plaid top, with a hat on. I thought, what the hell is he doing out here in the middle of nowhere on Highway 20? I finished that thought, and the man immediately darted in front of my car. I'm going 65 miles an hour and have literally no time to stop. I turned into the oncoming lane as this guy was obviously trying to commit an ending by car. I saw his white shoes in my headlights, and in a split second he went from fully visible to the darkest shadow I've ever seen. High beams did not pass through this person. I swerved and ended up sideways on the highway, having hit whoever it was. They landed on the hood of my car with both hands sprawled out. The man stared at me, and the primal fear I felt was something I can never describe in words. The void of black that this figure was made absolutely no sense. Coupled that with the thought that I just ended someone, then he just vanished, like smoke in the air, gone. I sat there dumbfounded, unable to breathe as I was so scared. I felt like I had to get out of there and sped up the hill. Called my husband, screaming in terror because I just hit someone who wasn't there. I got home after and there were no handprints on my car, no dents. It's like nothing happened. Couldn't sleep that night and couldn't go that ride home for a while. Made me question reality. I still don't know what it was or who it was. Checked on deaths on that stretch of road out of curiosity a week later, and found a guy had rolled his truck, ending his family and himself. I looked up his name on Facebook and his profile picture was him wearing a red plaid shirt and a hat. And what's even stranger? There's a mold-covered child's rabbit stuffed animal tied to the guardrail where I experienced this. Case file number 2583, written by Fantastic Sir 9732. The Crucifix, the Corner, and the Cold. In 2011, I moved to London to study. I missed out on the limited space in halls of residence, but was able to find a house share not too far away. It was an old house built in the 30s or 40s, but it was warm, and I lived with 4 others who, like me, could not get into student halls. One night I woke around 3:30 a.m. to a very cold room. When I say I woke suddenly alert, I mean I was completely alert and awake. The strange thing is the heat was on, yet the room was incredibly cold. I had that sense of feeling of being watched, and as I turned to look, in the corner of the room I saw a dark, thin, shadowy figure standing in the corner of my room, and it horrified me. This had never happened before. I was looking at a tall, dark figure staring right at me, and it felt evil. I stared back, petrified to move at first, trying to make any sense of what I was looking at. I switched on my bedroom light, and as fast as the light came on, the figure disappeared. The only thing in the corner of my room was my study desk. No clothing or tall object that could make out a shape that stood before me. I'm not religious, but from that day in that house I made sure to have a crucifix and any symbol to ward away evil in my room. I tried to talk about it with my housemates, and every time I did, my eyes would water up and I couldn't get the words out. I moved out of that house after I finished my first year. 11 years on and I still feel haunted about what happened that night. I make sure to carry a symbol of protection with me and practice my own rituals to keep evil away, for who knows when I may have another visit. So I don't think this is sleep paralysis, which would be the common explanation, because you were able to move, you turned your light on, you didn't say you were paralyzed. And I don't think this can happen without being paralyzed, although that's a question. Does it happen? Like, if it's not sleep paralysis, it would just be sleep torment, sleep awake nightmares. I don't know. Case file number 2584, written by Pierceful. Dial T for terror. One night in my house out in the country around 1 a.m., I was doing dishes. Over the sink in the kitchen is a window that overlooks a wooden patio on the backyard, and about 5 feet away from the sink and window is a large sliding glass door to get out onto said patio. The window over the kitchen was open, but the patio door was not. It was so dark outside on the other side of the window screen was pure black. I had minimal lights on in the kitchen, but nevertheless, one could definitely see my head and face in the window looking from outside. I reflected on this thought in the silence when directly ahead of me, at about 10 feet of distance, I hear a cell phone ring. I freeze and stare out into the blackness of the outdoors. The cell phone continues to ring, concealed in its distance from me, but clear in its closeness. It rang maybe 3 times before slowly I heard the creaking of the patio wood. One footstep, another footstep, crick, crack, crunk, then clunk, 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 down the steps of the patio. Away from me, and onto the grass in my backyard, I hear the soft but threatening footfalls on my lawn, and the cell phone ring grows fainter, more distant. Then, at what seems to be at the edge of the property, the cell phone is stifled mid-ring. Silence. Silence as I stare into nothing, a nothing that is not only probably staring back at me, but, I suddenly realize with horror, had been staring at me for an hour, without my knowing. Call in the army, whoever. Case file number 2585, written by Johnny Huckey. Sugar, Silence, and the Signal. Growing up, I always had a close relationship with my grandmother, on my father's side of the family. She had an extremely calm personality, and we had major respect for her as kids, because she never once raised her voice or took a tone with us. We visited her pretty much every week. She was in assisted living due to a stroke she had when I was about 5 years old, but she was still in decent health for somebody in their 80s. She was not ill by any means, and luckily never had to suffer through common illnesses among the elderly. Anyway, when I was 11 years old in 5th grade, I was coming back from one of my martial arts classes with my father. As we were leaving the studio, he seemed worried and was contemplating making the 30 to 45 minute drive to see his mother, who was living in a relatively nice assisted living facility that she liked. He ultimately decided not to go because it was already about 8 or so in the evening, and she would probably have already been in bed by then. I was concerned because he was worried to the point where it scared me. I had never heard him suddenly become so worried about his mother seemingly out of nowhere. The next day, I was randomly selected to give a presentation. This was a project I had done about a month prior, and my teacher had forgotten about me and maybe 1 or 2 other students until he saw the boxes in the rooms and decided to have us present that day. It was a memory box assignment where we had to decorate a shoebox and fill it with at least 5 small things, each with a relevant story. I had numerous things in there about my grandmother, and I talked about her, and how much I loved her in depth to my class. When I got home, my parents sat me in the master bedroom and told me that my grandmother had passed away. She was found slumped over in her electric wheelchair. She was diabetic and apparently her blood sugar dropped to a lethal level, and she passed out as she was about to roll out of her room and to breakfast. My father wanted to visit her at night with no previous plans to do so, and then me giving the only presentation I ever did about her when I did not know that she had actually died that morning, both always struck me as unusual and most definitely gave me a chills back then. Still gets me thinking. I mean, yeah, you had information that and your dad too had, information yes, but more of a feeling, a gut instinct. But where does that come from? How does your subconscious know? There's tendrils going out from your subconscious, grabbing onto information that seemingly is impossible to know, but there's so many instances of it happening where we can know more than is obviously in front of us. Case file number 2586, written by M87AM9L, Fear, Fluids, and Brothers. In 8th grade, I was alone in a room at my school when my nose suddenly started to bleed. I slightly panicked until only a few seconds after, my older brother and his friends came in. They immediately brought me some paper, but as I left the room to get into the bathroom, my brother silently told me he hated me. He was an idiot back then, and didn't want any of his siblings to have contact to his friends, not even in emergencies. Anyways, I went to the bathroom to wash myself, my nose still bleeding, when I suddenly heard strange noises. I heard knocking below me, as if somebody was using a broom, and knocked it against the roof. This was very strange because I was in an old school building where only the ground floor was unlocked for students. Basement and the other floors were locked and only the janitor had keys to them. I also started to hear stomping above me. All floors were built identically, so if somebody wanted to pull a prank, they had to get the keys to the basement, first floor, and the toilet keys. And how would they know somebody was in the bathroom below or over them? This was very strange to me, but the noises didn't stop. Suddenly, I hear the toilet paper fall off the shelf. I looked down, there was nothing. Looked up, the paper still stood on the shelf. Bang! The toilet doors behind me made a noise of being slammed open and shut. I immediately turned just to see the door standing still, not moving a single inch. At this point, I was already terrified, but didn't stop there. I looked into the mirror, my eyes full of fear. I heard the mirror making shaking sounds as if an earthquake was happening, but the mirror stood still. I stared into it for a few seconds, paralyzed by fear. Nothing made sense. I felt extremely off, as if something was going to attack me at any moment. I got back to my senses and ran out of the bathroom into the cafeteria, sat next to my friends, still holding the paper against my bleeding nose. I was visibly terrified and shaking extremely. Just as I wanted to tell my friends what had just happened, my teacher asked me about my nose and brought me into the first aid room. My nose continued to bleed for almost another 45 minutes. The doctor told me later that day that one of the main veins or something like that popped. He also said that my nose mucous membrane was missing entirely and that my blood veins shouldn't just lay there exposed inside my nose. Anyways, I never entered that bathroom again. Spooked the hell out of me. Thought it was a demon or the like. Case file number 2587, written by Astronaut. Bluetooth buds, boys, and a bounce. My boyfriend and I, both 17, are stereotypical for the most part. Sneaking out, doing nefarious things, light stuff like that. We had a super close call with his parents, so I had to walk over to his place at 12:36 a.m. I got there around 1:07. I called him and told him I was in the woods, and he'll need to come by me and we'll walk in together, cause I'm a scaredy cat, and didn't want to go in there by myself. For reference, it's like a sandwich. Woods, road in the middle, woods. One end of the road is connected to a bridge where it leads to his neighborhood. And then there goes on to another road that leads to a highway. Eventually, he shows up. He's not in his right mind and he's kind of being a dick. And we walk into the woods. At first, no issues. I have hallucinations and paranoia, but it was manageable. We did, stuff on the road in the forest. After we get our stuff together and get ready to leave, he stops. He puts his hand on his knife and starts telling me to walk, just staring at the forest. I've heard this tone of voice before, and it usually means that he sensed danger, and is telling me to get my stupid butt out. We go to the bridge and chill, and for some stupid reason we decide to go back to the forest, and walk all the way to the road that leads to the highway. It was terrifying. Dirt bikes that were nowhere to be heard, chains clinking, whispering, screaming. I chalked it up to my imagination, kept a straight face until we got back. It was pretty fun and I enjoyed it, in hindsight. I said my goodbyes to my boyfriend, and as I started my venture to go home, I realized I had forgotten my shorts in the forest. Now, I would have normally said, "Fluck it, no more shorts, I guess." But they had my Bluetooth earbuds in the pocket, and I love them to death. My boyfriend had walked home, so I gave him a call and let him know I had to go back into the forest to get my shorts. It was fine for the first bit, until I turned the corner. I didn't even notice, it's all so blurry in my mind now. My heart feels like it's pounding under my chest as I remember the noise this thing made. I was looking at the ground when I heard it. It was like a sound of a dog being murdered, a bat being stepped on. It sounded like glass shattering and being dragged across a chalkboard, and I couldn't move. Every millisecond felt like hours. It got closer with every elongated screech. I could feel it getting louder, my ears felt like they were being pierced. I guess my body realized Fawn was going to get me killed, so I booked it. I didn't even realize I was running until I was almost at the bridge and wept to my boyfriend. He tried to calm me down, and I had a panic attack trying to figure out how to get home. I wanted to go down the canal bank, the way I came, but I just kept spinning in a circle like I was trying to check every angle for anything. I eventually gained a bit of confidence to start the walk home, and everything felt like a footstep of someone else. I looked back at the forest after I was far away and noticed that the tree branch that had looked like it had been left from Hurricane Ida was gone. I guess it could have been a coyote, but nothing I've ever heard in all my life living out here has ever sounded like that. For reference, it was about 3:20 a.m. when I got home. Now time for the jokes of the day. I was abducted by aliens. They made me wash my hands, clean my room, and eat my vegetables. Turns out I was on the mothership. Today, my 5-year-old son told me they should rename pterodactyls to Skinosaurs. Appropriate. What do you call a Viking who lost his boat? A hiking. Most people don't know that back in 1912, Hellmann's mayonnaise was manufactured in England. In fact, the Titanic was carrying 1,720,000 jars of the condiment scheduled for delivery in Veracruz, Mexico. This would have been the largest single shipment of mayonnaise ever delivered to Mexico. But as we know, the great ship did not make it to New York. The ship hit an iceberg and sank, and the cargo was lost forever. The people of Mexico, who were crazy about mayonnaise and were eagerly awaiting its delivery, were saddened by the loss. Their anguish was so great that they declared a national day of mourning, which they still observe to this day, known as Cinco de Mayo. That was a long one, but it paid off. The therapist asked the wife why she wanted to end her marriage. She said she hated all the constant Star Wars Day puns. The husband looked at the therapist and said, "Divorce is strong with this one." Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony, signing off.